So you want to propagate your plant because you want to take a cutting from your mother plant to create new Fiddle Leaf Fig plants. It's incredibly easy to do. I have a video of how to propagate your plant in 5 minutes, so check that out below. But today I just want to talk about the biggest mistakes I see. Mistake number one is trying to propagate a plant that isn't healthy. If your plant is dropping leaves, if it has brown spots, if it isn't actively growing, you're gonna have a hard time propagating it. So you need to start with a healthy specimen, preferably one that is within its growing season and actually putting out new growth. That means that the auxins or the plant growth hormones are flowing within your plant and that it is more likely to grow roots and propagate. The second thing that I see that's a big mistake is cutting too many leaves to propagate. I think that people think the more leaves, the better. So if you take a cutting that maybe has 4 leaves and you put it into water to propagate it and get it to grow roots, that you're gonna be more successful. The problem is those leaves require energy and nutrients and water and they require attention from your plant. And if there's 4 leaves on one little cutting, it basically overwhelms your cutting and it can't provide for the leaves. The leaves stop doing photosynthesis and the whole cycle just dies. So I recommend doing 1, 2, or 3 leaves max. And so that means, being intentional about where you take your cutting so that you have maybe 1 or 2 leaves. You still need the leaves to pull in light and give your cutting the photosynthesis and the energy that it needs. You just don't want to overwhelm your cutting with too many responsibilities of live leaves on the end of the plant, if that makes sense. Mistake number 3 is not using a rooting hormone. It is critically important to use a rooting hormone, whether you use a powder one that you dip. If you're propagating in water, we make a propagation promoter where you can just put a few drops into the water and it tells your plant to grow new roots. It's so easy, it's so simple, it's all natural. These rooting hormones are pretty inexpensive, and so I love water propagation, so I will take my cutting, I put a few drops of the propagation promoter in there, I put the cutting in there, 8 weeks later I have a new plant. And so it couldn't be easier, but propagation promoters definitely increase your success. Mistake number 4 is if you try to propagate with leaves that are older leaves. You always want to take the newest growth on your plant because that's what's already actively growing, that's what has the right signals, that's what has the right hormones going through it. So if you take, say a cutting of a lower leaf that's an old leaf, it's much less likely to grow new roots. The concept in botany is called apical dominance, where basically your plant puts all of its energy towards the newest growth. And so that's what's gonna be naturally growing, and the older leaves aren't gonna have as good of a success rate. Maybe you could take leaves from the middle of your plant, but taking the newer growth makes it a lot easier and gives you a better chance of success. Mistake number 5 is letting the water get too warm. A lot of times I see people take their cuttings, put them into a jar and put them on a windowsill where the water gets hot, the cutting gets hot, and the water actually starts growing bacteria or fungus. That is really not what you want. You're gonna wanna do the same thing you would with a normal Fiddle Leaf Fig, which is bright, indirect light, no direct sunlight. You don't want the water to get hot and to get stagnant and to get problematic with bacteria or fungus. So mistake number 6 is kind of the opposite of that, is letting your cuttings get too cold. Now you can actually buy these little heating mats that go underneath your cuttings to warm them up a bit, because your plant cuttings will grow new roots faster if they're a bit warmer. I'm not talking hot, I'm just talking 75 degrees or so, just a little bit warmer to give them a little more energy. And so you don't want them to get too hot, but you also don't want them to get too cold. So try, one of these seedling mats or one of these, I will link one below, where you basically put this little heating mat underneath your cuttings when they're in a jar in the container of water, or even if you put your cutting in soil, you can just keep it warm to increase the growth of your seedlings. Mistake number 7 is forgetting to give your cuttings enough light. They probably need even more light than an active tree that has more leaves. They only have 1 or 2 or 3 leaves, and so as bright of indirect light as you can give, the better. I know a lot of people take their cuttings and they put them in a corner of their house and they wonder why they're not successful. They need light, and so I recommend putting them in the brightest kind of indirect light spot that you have in your house. Mistake number 8 is failing to replace the water if the water gets murky, if there's bacteria, or if there's fungus. It's really not going to hurt your cutting to dump out the water and put in new water. I would also add new propagation promoter or new rooting hormone at that time, so it's still getting the signal to grow new roots. But don't worry about replacing the water once a week or every couple of weeks or whenever you find that it's murky or it's cloudy. Mistake number 9 is not giving yourself enough chances for success. And so what I mean by that is I always, if I'm gonna do cuttings, I'll probably do 5 at the minimum. You really want to give yourself enough chances to be successful because nobody wins 100% of the time. So if you only take 1 cutting, you have a pretty good chance that it's gonna fail. But if you do 5 or more than that, you almost have a 100% chance of success if you follow the correct protocols. And so give yourself enough chances to succeed that if a few of your cuttings fail, it's not the end of the world. And the last mistake I see when it comes to propagation is giving up too soon. And this goes for the rest of your life too. So you don't want to give up right before you have success. When you are propagating a plant, typically we'll see new roots starting to form, little tiny white bumps or short roots coming in 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but it can take up to a month. It depends on the plant, it depends on your growing conditions, it depends on the warmth. So don't give up before at least 8 weeks. Give it a full 8 weeks. If you still see nothing happening, then you could maybe throw away your cuttings, but just don't give up before you are patient and you give your cutting enough time to start growing roots. I recommend repotting your cutting when your roots are about 1 inch long, put it into moist soil, and then you're starting the growth of the new plant. It's just a really fun process to do propagation. So share your success stories or your failures with me in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and subscribe to this channel if you want to learn more. Bye.